ADHD stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. People with ADHD are known to have an interest-based nervous system, which means that we find it hard to put energy or attention into things that don't stimulate them. Also struggle with executive functioning, which can be deciding to do something and actually going to do it. And again, the inattention, which is known as an inability to pay attention, which is not the case. It's just the ability to pay attention to so many things at once and give most energy to the ones that are interesting. And that's one of our superpowers, is the ability to hyperfocus. That's why it's really helpful to do a job that you like. A lack of dopamine production is something that people with ADHD have. And when you lack dopamine, which is a reward chemical hormone, you don't feel good as often. So you'll find things that make you feel that reward.
Hi, I'm the self-development coach, Johnny Lawrence, and welcome to the Self-Development Podcast. Today is exciting. We're live and direct all the way from New York. Well, I'm not, Penny is, but we'll get to that in a minute. In this episode, I'll be speaking with the fabulous Penny Jarrett. Penny works in the mental health and wellness space and uses her ADHD and CPTSD to help people overcome their complex mental health challenges. She's a writer, a mentor, and a speaker, more recently performing a TEDx talk called How I Learnt to Fix My Broken Brain by Healing My Broken Heart. Such a beautiful title. This talk focuses on her ADHD, on her ADHD and unresolved trauma experience, and has gone on to help many people understand and heal themselves. Penny offers courses and a community that guides you towards healing and wholeness, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. We can just go with that. How are you?
I'm good.
There is a thing, right, where I say that I read off a piece of paper and it's horrid. I hate it. Whenever I can do it, I'll run it a couple of times before we start, and then I'll run it when I do it, and it just goes wrong every single time. I thought I would get caught out on this CPTSD.
No, you slowed it down. You slowed it down.
Nailed that, but somehow messed up healing and wholeness. Worked that out. But I worked
it's
out
like it could be a tongue twister, healing and wholeness.
That's true. Thanks for that. That's kind. That's very kind. But I just realized that you just gotta own it, right? It's real.
Yeah.
Like people make mistakes.
Conversation. I sometimes mid-conversation forget what I'm saying and ask people to bear with me for about 90 seconds. So you're doing great.
Thank you. I can't say I won't do that too. So we'll just wait and see. But how are you anyway?
I'm good. Thank you. It's 9:12. It's 9 a.m. here on the East Coast, so it's only early. I love staying on the East Coast. I feel like a weather reporter. But yeah, so it's morning. So the day is just begun. I'm feeling good. I'm happy to be here, and I love your podcast. So I'm happy to be a guest.
Listen, I've been wanting to talk to you for a while, man. You know, we share some sort of mutual friends. And I don't know, I feel like we should have spoken ages ago, to be honest, but we haven't. Yeah. But here we are. So let's make the most of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But listen, I watched your TED talk and I loved it. I really did love it. I thought it was so well done. And I don't know, just your story and, you know, the way in which you go through it. I can imagine how helpful that's going to be to some people. I really can. So how do you feel about it?
Well, it's hard. I love it. I love that I got everything in there that I wanted to. But when the guys from the TEDx team reached out to me, they actually asked me to do a TED talk on why women get diagnosed with ADHD a lot later than men, or, you know, girls and boys. And that's because I'd written articles for HuffPost and Stylist about that. And because I was, you know, when I first got diagnosed, I was really passionate about those stats. But being someone who is just constantly trying to learn and dig deeper and understand exactly what I'm going through, and not just like, I can't just accept a label and be told something is permanent and not, you know, dig. And also because we just wanting to understand myself and help people understand themselves. Everyone's journey is different, and that's the reason why these things show up in differently in different people. So by the time, because COVID happened after they asked me to do it, so I'd written kind of like some points on why women get that, you know, got all my stuff together ready. and thinking I had to memorize an 18-minute talk off by heart, which blew my pajamas off.
Yeah.
But over time, like with the lockdown and then further research I was doing, I was like, wait, I don't want to just talk about why women get, I want to talk about this. And if you saw the draft that I thought was final, it would have been so much for anyone to absorb, because I was getting all of these other findings. Like when I tell you, it went so many directions that I tried to fit into, and it was just overwhelming me. So I watched a few TED Talks of other people just sharing their story, not trying to be a teacher. And that just inspired me to kind of hone it in, go with my story, go back and talk about some of the things that are a bit harder, rather than just, so people can more relate rather than learn. But then I in the end, I loved it. It was just longer than the 18 minutes, which is fun.
What I loved is how you brought it all together. Like I just loved that, because it I don't know, it was just really like, it had some real actionable stuff in it, because that's something that when it comes to neurodiversity, there's not always a lot you feel that you can do. Sometimes there's that sort of like diagnosis of I don't know, autism or ADHD or whatever, and it's like, right, there you go. And you're like, you feel like, oh well, is that it then? And it's very much feels like, because I got diagnosed with dyslexia, and there was this moment of like me acknowledging all of these things that I didn't think I could do now. And then I was like, well, wait, you've done all that, so what the heck are you talking about? And then it was like, okay, true to form, like, well, what can I do? Well, you can do this, or you can do it, how can you get around it? And I saw that in your talk. There was almost like, don't fret, here's some stuff we could do, and I just thought it was brilliant. So I'm going to put that in the show notes so people can go and check it out. So hopefully,
thank you,
right people will get to see it. But I mean, for those that might not have met you yet and might not be following you yet, can you tell people a bit about yourself and sort of your unreal journey that you've been on so far?
I was thinking about every time I do a talk or like talk to anyone, and I always think, how can I bullet point this? But never.
Can we have the 25-minute version, not the other one?
No. I've got 28 in me. But basically, I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 30. So I'm 36 next week. So that was about 6 years ago. And it shocked me, because I didn't know what ADHD really was. I didn't know anything about mental health. I thought, I knew a lot about people. I cared a lot about people. So I was able to kind of, when I think about it now, it was almost like I was trauma informed before knowing what to be trauma informed was. So going through quite a lot as a young person, and I had quite a traumatic childhood and lived in and around a lot of dysfunction, then witnessed a lot of domestic violence at home. And then when I was 15, got into my first, say, serious relationship. But at 15, it sounds silly to say that, but it was. and then experienced my own, went through abuse and domestic violence in that. And I had remained hopeful and just had this, like, I know if God's allowing this, it's got to be used to help people. And so I always wanted to write books that helped people go through other things I'd been through before all of that. Like, I'd experienced eating disorders, and again, just living in kind of poverty and a unstable home. And I just felt so empowered throughout my life, throughout my 20s, just knowing that I'm going to help people. I want to work with children. I want to make sure that children that live in dysfunction know how amazing life can be, and know how much they've got in them that they can pull out. And so I always had this, and I knew that it's not always like that. When you go through certain things, and when you've experienced a certain type of environment, that's not always the outcome. That's like a success story, so to speak. And I didn't really have a lot of hands-on support, so I knew it was, I knew I was being given grace, and I was being blessed to be able to see it like that. So, but then it got to a point where I started to lose that hope, and I started to I started to substance misuse and block out pain. And I had loads of grief that I'd never addressed. And, when I was 15, as well as getting into that awful relationship, I also lost my mum to a drug overdose. And I still kind of remained up, and I was, just trying to see the good in life and try to not lose, I keep saying hope, but this is what it was. I remember knowing that my hope was dwindling. And it came off the back of trying to clean my life up, trying to stop partying and smoking and drinking and doing all these things which were numbing my pain, stop trying to, find love in all the wrong places. And when I started to get that awareness, that's when I started to feel everything. And that's when I started. And obviously I was at the beginning of a healing journey. I didn't know that though. Yeah. I didn't know that when I stopped finding negative coping mechanisms, I'm going to start to feel and remember things that I'd blocked out. I didn't know that. I thought I was going to be off on my way, no hangovers, no distractions, but it felt quite the opposite at times. And had I have known, I would have embraced it, but I just again, didn't know anything about mental health, didn't know what depression was, didn't know what PTSD was, or even anxiety. I thought I was just riddled with fear because of the fearful situations I'd been in. Yeah. And so when I got diagnosed with ADHD, a lot of my struggles made sense. I knew I had to heal from stuff that had happened when I was younger. And I just thought one day when I'm ready, I'll just spend a week in prayer and I'll come out healed. It's just that right now I'm not doing that because I'm party Penny and I'm not doing that.
So you named yourself and everything.
I was like, when I clean up my life, I'm not focusing on what I need to be. When I do, I'm going to be off on my way, not having issues that relate to my childhood and not feeling scared of bad things happening to me. I'm going to be fine. But obviously that week of prayer led to a process. And so what I'm getting at is mental health was never spoken about around me in any of the places I'd been, in any of the workplaces, uni, school, college, nothing. I'd never heard positive conversations about mental health, only stories in my area of, why, and sorry to put it like this, but so-and-so was seen running down the street naked with a gun. Yeah, he's got mental health. Or watching news and watching soaps and things about people with mental health. And it was always negative. Yeah. So finding out that I had ADHD made me aware of neurodiversity, made me aware of the fact that, yeah, I've had all this trauma, but there's actually something different about my brain, or my brain works in a different way. And there must be so many other people going through this that if I haven't heard the conversation and I thought I was wise, there must be so many people struggling and not knowing why. And they haven't even been through, haven't had a bad childhood or haven't been through the obvious things I had, which I knew had changed me. And so I then became really passionate about trying to understand it. I did feel lots of relief with the diagnosis because I thought, okay, so I don't have to go and deal with all the trauma right now. I could just deal with ADHD. And then I was told that it was this is the words I was presented with. It's an incurable brain disorder, but you can function. I was like, hun, I've functioned. Come on. You have to say it like that.
I've been functioning.
I didn't get dropped here by a helicopter. I'm functioning. But it was just a feeling of kind of like, I thought that what I was experiencing with the hopelessness and feeling nothing and feeling numb and feeling less empathetic and, just different. I thought this sounds like stories I've heard about menopause. And whilst I know women can go through menopause at lots of different ages, and I didn't have other symptoms. I thought, well, I have turned 30, and I do feel worse before my period, which I didn't before. I weren't somebody who had, PMS or I didn't feel like now. Because I'm like not using substances and doing all these things, I know I feel the change before my period. I know. But I never experienced that before. I never knew that I'm going to feel very different and sometimes a bit meh, And so...
Is that a medical term?
Yeah, literally.
Meh.
And so when so again, I thought I'm going through something with my hormones, but it turned out I was diagnosed with ADHD, and funnily enough, during lots of my research, as I mentioned earlier, I also definitely had a hormone imbalance too. But when I got told that I would have to take medication for the rest of my life, because there's no other really way. I've got severe combined ADHD. So there's, some people more have attention deficit. Some people are more lean over to the hyperactive side. I'm not necessarily a fan of them just separating it into two like that, but it's how how doctors work.
Yeah.
I was told I had both and severe. So when I was told I had to take medication, I was just like, that's definitely, I'm definitely not going to take medication, because I was scared of it and I didn't know anything about medication.
So do you not take medication then?
I don't, but
Oh,
I have.
wow.
I did at one point.
Yeah.
But so when the doctor said that, I said, no, I just want therapy. I've heard about CBT. I just want I just want someone to teach me how to get over some of these things. I didn't know what I was saying, but I wanted a coach. I that's what I wanted. I didn't know that that's what I was asking for. And so the doctor was just like, no, he's a psychiatrist. He's like, I'm a prescriber, hun. And so he was just like,
wow.
So what I decided to do was to pretend to take the medication, and then tell him it doesn't work. So then he could give me therapy, but what I did instead is I just went and researched how people manage ADHD medication free, and started to do what I'd learned, and had a great time, felt in control, I knew how ADHD was showing up. Just knowing that, I was able to have more compassion for myself, know how to manage my time so that I could not have, and the way that it felt to me is so that ADHD wouldn't win some days. And then what happened is, on that journey, some bad things were happening around me. Just sorry if this is a trigger warning for anyone, but the Grenfell fire happened at the bottom of my road, and also a colleague and friend took their own life at work, after asking me, the day after asking me to help them in some way, because they'd heard that I heard you're talking about mental health online, like, can we have a chat? And I didn't get around to having that chat with him, but he took his own life. So when those things happened, with the Grenfell thing, I noticed that I went numb. I just noticed that this, and then that happened, and basically I got asked to do a talk at an event around, there was a fundraiser for people from Grenfell, to help support the survivors of Grenfell, and it was going to be at an opening of a chicken place, like a Caribbean chicken restaurant. It's funny, I don't think I've mentioned this in an interview before, because I'm remembering it now, and but I told you should have asked me for bullet points. But so I got asked to do a talk about ADHD there. I don't know how it was related, but I think they wanted speakers to speak about different things and just to bring awareness. But I was like, it's going to be difficult, because at the time I was managing ADHD by cutting out certain foods, and meat at the time was one of them.
Right.
And it wasn't until they said, okay, well, could you do one on PTSD? And I was like, I know a bit about PTSD, not a lot, but I'll look into it. And I was going through such a hard time. I was like drinking just to get the confidence to do it. And this was on the day of the talk. And then when I looked it up, I realized that what I was experiencing, I went to research deeply CPTSD to do the talk based around it. And I thought, this is what I'm experiencing. And funnily enough, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD, is what people who have either lived in a traumatic place, like a war zone or poverty or domestic abuse, like lived in, or any kind of abuse, lived in an environment where there's traumatic, trauma.
Yeah.
Or somebody who's had a lot of traumatic things happen and not had support after any of them, so it's all kind of become complex. And I was like, every kind of point as to why someone could have CPTSD was me.
Yeah.
But the thing that interested me was that it showed up in the exact way ADHD does, but also the fact that I weren't able to feel. My hope was being lost, you know. And so I couldn't really do the talk. I did get on the stage, and I can't remember how I got out of it, but the organizer was amazing. But it was just so hard for me to talk to people about it. And then I went and spoke to someone, and yeah, that's when I got diagnosed with CPTSD. And it was funny because that made, you know, I'm not saying ADHD didn't make sense, because yeah, I ticked loads of the boxes that fall under the 6.4 trillion traits.
Whoa.
But there are so many under ADHD, and I resonated with loads of them, but not all of them. But when I dug deeper into CPTSD and saw that depression and anxiety are symptoms of CPTSD, and dug deeper into those and went further, I was like, do I have ADHD or do I have CPTSD? I know they're saying I've got both, but I mean, if I concentrated on actually healing my trauma, and you can't just sit down and concentrate on it. But I mean, if I really thought about what I've been through and tried to seek help around that, and tried to, you know, reframe limiting beliefs, get, you know, all of the, you know, your brain gets disrupted when you're experiencing, your brain development gets disrupted when you're experiencing certain things as a child. If I was to work on kind of reparenting myself and all of that stuff, like, would I really have these ADHD traits that led to that diagnosis, or would I have them less severe? If I'm having them double, maybe I could focus on eliminating the one that is healable and doesn't, I don't get told I need lifelong medication for, you know. So that's where the title of the TED Talk came, how I learned to, because the term, what people used to describe ADHD as, is broken brain. It's like kind of a term that was used. And so I even did a film with a filmmaker called Broken Brain about ADHD.
It's so destructive, that, isn't it? If you think about it, like, it just labels you immediately broken.
I know,
you know,
but it's funny because, you know, a lot of us, when we're struggling so deeply, to admit that we're broken is a lot easier than like looking at all of the things that it's like, I'm broken, I work different. Obviously, some people are like, I'm never saying that. And I now have stepped into that place. But because I felt so guilty for a lot of the things that I had fallen short on, I was really comfortable just saying I'm broken.
No, but that's okay. But what I mean is other people forcing that term on you. That's the bit, you know, like,
imagine owning that.
And it's like, you know, I know that, you know, I've got a set of friends who, you know, I come from a very traumatic background myself. I share a lot of the same upbringing as you do. I resonate greatly with it. And we use humor all the time. And like, I remember once we were away as couples, and the lads were sat over a little way, we're having some beers and we were talking, and me and a friend were laughing about some of the really obviously quite horrendous things that happened, but we were talking about it as if it was humorous in some way, not realizing at the time that was the way we coped with it. And one of my friends walked off crying. And that's when I realized, whoa, hang on a minute. I mean, this is a long time ago. It's when I realized that, wait a second, you know, maybe this isn't the way to deal with this. Maybe this isn't the right way to think about this. But I mean,
people say, you know, the term, if you don't laugh, you cry, is real.
Well, I often find out if I'm with Marines or whatever, that like we have a similar humor, and they're like, "Are you a Marine?" I'm like, "No," and then I'm like, "I'm really not a Marine." But you know, like you say, when
I haven't been on the front line, hun.
No, but like, when you think about it, like, you know, some of the things that we've been through, you're right. That's exactly the right term. You know, if you didn't laugh, you would cry. You know, you would be sad all the time. I mean, I resonate a lot with that. What you're just talking about, losing hope, because I had a really surreal moment once when, you know, I had to move out of my family home because of violence and stuff when I was about 16, 17 years old. I was working quite a few jobs, and I was walking back from one of my jobs late at night, and I was crying because I didn't have any money. And I was thinking to myself, like, is this really what life is? Like, is this how hard life is? This can't be right, you know? And I wasn't suicidal or anything, but that's exactly the right term. I was just losing hope. I was just like, what's the point of this? Like, I don't understand. This is so hard. You know, I'm doing everything I can. I've got no more hours left in the day, and I still haven't got any money. And I had a gas meter, and yes, to pay money, put on the card and put the
I
card
know
in there,
everyone.
and it was just like magic, like like just suck all the money up and gone, you know. But I didn't have any money, and I remember walking down this alley crying, losing hope, and I got to the end of that alleyway, and this is what happened. I looked on the floor, and there was 20 quid. And I was just like, whoa. And I just broke down, man. I just couldn't believe it. And it was just like, you know, sometimes in life, you know, I always say this to clients, I always say, like, never give up, because if you give up, that could have been the moment before you find your 20 quid, you know, and you just don't know. You don't know what's around the corner, you know. So hope's so important. And, you know, I think you highlighting that is exactly right.
Yeah, it's what you one of the defining moments actually that led me to go and seek, you know, some answers was that, just like what you said, I weren't suicidal, but for the first time, despite everything I'd been through, and I this sounds like I'm a line from my TED talk, but my TED talk is just me talking, so it does sound scripted. I cringe when I say a line from my TED talk.
Oh, you might have seen me in such things as my TED talk.
I mean, way back when. No, but the defining moment for me was that I weren't suicidal, but for despite everything that had happened, and like I said, I was always hopeful, and I was always like, I'm going to use this to help people. I'm going to write books. I'm going to, you know, foster children, but I understood why people took their own lives, and I'd never had. I'd always had a hope. So not that I ever judged, but when I'd hear that people taking their own lives, I thought, so if I've been through all of this, and that wouldn't cross my mind, because I'm so excited about everyone I can help with all of despite the, you know, the pain at the time. It's like, how am I going to get out of this? But when you do feel that glimmer, you're like, I can't wait to set people free. I can't wait. But then one day it was a few times the week before my period, I understood. I was like, I understood what I was like, I get why people don't want to be here. And that was the first time I'd heard myself say that. And I was like, okay, it's time to nip this in the bud.
Yeah, because that is a very serious frame of mind. And I share that with you, actually, that I can't say I've necessarily been suicidal, but there has been some times in life where it's just felt so impossible that I'm just like, what's the point? And I get it. And I also understand, and I say this respectfully, how someone can make a terrible decision in the moment and not really mean it as such, you know, and how it could just go too far. So that's why it's so important, like people like yourself are telling their stories, because that feeling that somebody else has been through it and is doing okay, that's hope. Yeah. That's what it is. It's hope, you know. And, you know, you and I often relate what I went through, and, you know, sounds like you've gone through a lot of the similar stuff too, as our programming. You know, like we were programmed to think and feel a certain way all the time. That's like, you know, this body that we have is our hardware, and the programming is all the stuff that we were given to us by people that brought us up. You know, that's not just our parents, that's extended family, that's people on the street, you know. People on the street, they'll take you in like a family, wouldn't they?
You know? And that's why I said our brain development, if you want to call it that, or the way that our soul perceives the world, is disrupted. It's completely disrupted. And when I said earlier, I had to, you know, reframe some limiting beliefs. That's a very light way of saying I had to unlearn everything. The goggles I had on were completely distorted. The way that I saw the world was from a fearful, traumatized, lack-based, you know, scary way. And I had to try and get them off. Yeah. And that, just for anyone, it just came into my mind where people think, you know, you go to a retreat, you spend time in therapy, and then you heal. It's not. It's, you know, you can overcome something that's held you back. Again, something you think about the world, you can realize it's not true and feel healed that day, because you've just stripped back something that has directed you in a bad way. That isn't can you hear that beeping? Is it me?
I'm not sure. It's all right, don't worry.
Hopefully it's not me. Sorry. But then also you can feel like you've overcome so many things, and then you get you go through a new phase in life, like you get into a relationship or you have a child. And I haven't had a child yet, but from speaking to people, and then you just go, you feel like you've gone backwards, and it's not the case. It's again, there are things in you that feel so normal because it's part of your programming, like you've said, and until you can see the opposite or see the truth, it can always make you feel bound.
Yeah, well, our programming is, it's a bit like, like our phones, right? Apple sends an update, and if you don't update your program, your software on your phone, it stops working properly. and that's kind of how it goes. I had a really a similar sort of feeling when I had children. Well, I didn't, my wife did, but I was part of it, promise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was there. but when I had my son, I had a new perspective on my childhood trauma and the way that my father was towards me, and that messed me up. And I couldn't be messed up because I had to be a dad, and my wife needed me, and she was recovering from labor and stuff. And it was just this thing of, okay, I know what he did was wrong. I know all the things were unkind, and he must have been going through his own things and all that sort of stuff. I get all that. But then when I held my son and I looked at my son, I thought, what? How? What? I don't understand. Like, and it just like malfunction. I couldn't handle that. So you're right. Like you can only get so far sometimes until the next part of your life unfolds, and then it gives you what you need to move on and do the next part of the healing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, and that's it. That's why it's a journey, because I think like I said to you before we recorded, the scariest statement in the whole wide world is I'm all fixed. It's like, not asking for trouble.
Yeah. But it's in some of those moments where you have an epiphany, or you do experience a moment or a day of healing, or you realize, whoa, I've just remembered a moment of abandonment or neglect from my childhood, which makes me look at my partner like this. And it's all because of that day. I'm free. And you have all these happy chemicals, and you see it. And then, something happens, and it feels like you've lost it, when
it just feels like you've got choice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it just feels like all of a sudden you've got a choice not to think that way, because you understand it now. Now I understand why I'm doing it, or what leads me to think this way. I can choose to not do it now, whereas before it might have felt a bit more like a compulsion, or just who you are. But I mean, what is, for those that are not sure, like, what is ADHD, and most importantly, how does it present differently in men and women?
So ADHD stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Silly name for what it is, but so it goes.
Nice short title.
Huh?
Nice and short.
It doesn't even.
Let's just throw all the words at it. Come on.
That doesn't paint the picture.
Yeah, it's like dyslexia. I hate that word, especially as a dyslexic. It's like, who spelt that word? I don't understand. So cruel.
Literally, trying to say that you've got it, and
you're like, can you write it down? No, I can't.
I can't.
Like, where's the Y come from? Like, anyway, sorry.
And so some of the things that I've kind of identified happen in the diagnosis. I'm going to call it that because, again, it's different for everyone. And, your past experiences, the way that you've coped with pain and trauma, all plays a part. So do your hormones, so do the condition of your blood and what you're putting into your body. So because you've asked specifically about ADHD, I'll talk about the diagnosis. And some of the things that I've noticed are the defining kind of, because there's so many traits, I could list them off here forever. But, it's people with ADHD are known to have an interest-based nervous system, which means that we find it hard to put energy or attention into things that don't stimulate them. Right. And also an understimulated brain, so always looking for stimulation in other places. Also struggle with executive functioning, which can be the deciding to do something and actually going to do it. there's also impulsivity, there is hyperactivity, and again, the inattention, which is known as an inability to pay attention, which is not the case. It's just the ability to pay attention to so many things at once and give most energy to the ones that are interesting. So that can sound like, well, that's normal. And I guess, you know, like I said to you before recording as well, people with ADHD go through things that everyone goes through. We all forget things, we all lose things, we all have hyper moments, but it's just, you know, in the wrong environments or inability to prioritize because of it. So for instance, someone with ADHD might be able to Google and research penguins for 4 hours. And that's one of our superpowers, is the ability to hyperfocus.
Have you done that?
It's why, yes, it's why it's really helpful to do a job that you like, or to be around, you know, or to find reward. Because also, a lack of dopamine production is something that people with ADHD have. And when you lack dopamine, which is a reward chemical hormone, you don't feel good as often. So you'll find things that make you feel that reward or that rush of happy chemicals. So it's why a lot of people with ADHD struggle with substance misuse and don't necessarily get as high or drunk as a person who doesn't, because it kind of, they're looking for dopamine, which is what these chemicals, which these substances give you. And where someone could drink a few glasses of wine and be all over the place because they're drunk, a person with ADHD might, and not everyone, might just feel how you might feel at 2 PM, you know. And so when talking about, I've gone all over the place, but talking about finding things that stimulate you, like for instance, sitting and going through and replying to emails that might be important. Someone with ADHD might put that off because it's not stimulating enough to hold their focus. So they might try and do a few things at once. And again, these are some of the defining factors. So with all of that, in boys, and I guess this is just based on, I guess, the original way that the defining kind of nature of a man, nature of a male, nature of a female used to be kind of described, but it would show up in boys as, you know, the inattention and I guess the hyperactivity will come up as disruptive. You know, and if they're more kind of steered toward masculine activity, it might also lead to aggression and not putting. So you'd find in young people and maybe even adults that they do more risky behavior. They are hyper. They might, you know, in school, I guess, throw things around and be really loud. And I guess in adulthood, I can't speak for all men, but it might show up in, you know, the understimulated might show up in and unable to commit in relationships, because the stimulation of the first stages of it, it's not that they're bored. Like people say, oh, we're bored easy. It's not. It's a stimulation of starting something is great, but then after that, it's wanting that again. And because they got such a rush from the beginning of a relationship or kissing someone for the first time, they might just want to do that all the time. And then they're like, oh, you can't commit. And it's just that actually I'm just looking for stimulation all the time, and this is the way that I do it. You know, and I'm not saying it's not the same for women, but a man that I've coached and worked with, that was one of the things that he struggled with. Even though he'd been in love, that's where he got his dopamine from when he stopped using substances. And then and I talk about as a young person, because that's when the diagnosis could and should really happen to help you as an adult. And then in girls, the reason why girls don't get diagnosed as much is because, and again, we should really talk about when you're younger, because when you're when you're younger and you're presenting these behavior patterns, you've got parents, a lot of people, or teachers that are watching you because that's their job. When you're an adult, you just go wayward and you struggle. And so young people, again, so boys, disruptive, distractible, throwing things around, unable to process emotions, emotional dysregulation is a thing, rejection sensitive. So kind of trying to avoid being rejected by doing too much. I'm going all over the place.
No.
But also, again, it's just a very kind of outward expression, meltdowns and stuff like that. And with girls, because girls in school might have been more reserved, traditionally or commonly, it would be more of a like, you know, having the low stimulation might, instead of running around and doing things, they might overthink and start to like find things to focus on, which can be inward. So that can present in a way where, you know, having a focus on how you look, and that can lead to eating disorders. Also the physical things, biting your nails, because that's stimulating, and that kind of, the hyperactivity gets kind of fed when you're biting your nails or twisting your hair or daydreaming and drifting off and things like that. And I am going all over the place, and I feel like I'm making it clear, but the reason I'm kind of struggling with just saying this in a clear way, like I probably used to be able to, is because I'm so torn between just saying this is just ADHD, because it's not just, do you know what I mean? It's not just how ADHD presents. Yeah, it can make, you know, if you were to just say, okay, so if someone with ADHD doesn't produce as much dopamine, has an interest-based nervous system, struggles with emotional regulation, and has an understimulated brain, then let's kind of look at how to do things, make life work for them so that those things are taken care of. And then all these behavior patterns and all these struggles and thoughts wouldn't necessarily happen to the degree that they do. Does that make sense?
It does. And something I picked up on there, I might be wrong, but it felt like that you were sort of gesturing towards the idea that males or boys are sort of a bit more outward, and that females are a bit more sort of inward. They sort of, you know, like you said, you know, eating disorders, focusing on themselves as a sort of traditional sign. But as we all know, in all these different diagnoses in neurodiversity, nobody's typical. There's no such thing. So it's a very difficult question to ask.
And I was kind of given my spin through experience with myself and work with people on the diagnosis and the traits. So again, some of the things are forgetfulness, cutting people off when they're speaking, because the inability to just kind of, the impulsivity, just wanting to say it before you forget, you know, late for everything, going to leave the house and then thinking, actually, let me just go and sort out my DVDs into alphabetical order. I'm 5 minutes early, but it takes 2 hours. So time blindness, not knowing how long things take.
Wow. Yeah.
You're putting things off, saying I'll do it later. Why? Because it's not stimulating. I know it's important. I know the sink is 6 feet high, and I do want to clean it, but it's not going to stimulate me. So I'll do something else quickly to stimulate me, to give me the motivation, and then shatter yourself because you've spent 6 hours doing it and never get around to the dishes. You know, it's just, you know,
there's going to be so many people resonating with that.
Misplacing things, you know.
That's a great example, though, a really good example, because I know someone that does that. I think they'll get a lot of peace from knowing that it's well.
And it's not like, oh, this is because, oh, this is ADHD. This is, no, I have an understimulated brain, or I need more stimulation. I'm not motivated to do that. The importance of the dishes being done doesn't motivate me like it would someone else. The importance of calling up British Gas to get the you know, or whoever, to get the cooker working again, I want to, because I need to cook dinner later, but I don't want to sit on the phone. So I'm going to quickly do something just to give me a good feeling so I can do it. 6 weeks later, it's freezing in the house because it's now. Do you know what I mean? And it's like,
I do.
It's like the prioritizing things based on importance, rather than feeling and reward systems is completely, you know, it goes out the window. And so, and there are, again, you could say it's, I don't get a reward from doing that, even though I need to do it. I don't get a reward from doing online shopping because I don't want to sit on the website, but I need to eat later. I'm going to waste money ordering food now, you know. And so you know, and I'm just going to give a little solution, because again, these things, you can take medication, which makes you hone in and focus, and you can't get out your chair until your lips are dry, and all of a sudden emails seem interesting because they're important. Great. There's downsides to that, but also just breaking things up into small stuff. Like, I don't enjoy doing the dishes, but guess what I'm going to do? I am going to spend 10 minutes doing the dishes, or I'm going to do 10 dishes. And then after that, I'm going to spend 20 minutes playing words with friends. So that's the reward system. And that's the
I like
way
that.
to break things down. And that's, and so, yeah.
That's quite a successful way to approach anything, I think, as well, But I tell you what I was really interested in is, can you explain what emotional dysregulation is and how it can impact you and how you can help yourself? Because I found that really interesting, when you spoke about that in your TED talk.
Yeah. So emotional dysregulation, and again, it can be different for everyone, is just an inability to understand and process your emotions. And so something really small can feel really big. I'm saying this now, and again, sorry for anyone that came here to get full ADHD, info, because I'm gonna have to bring it back to childhood, or not childhood, but any kind of trauma. We've all been through things that were difficult, and a lot of us have coped better than we thought we ever could. And the reason why is because we brushed it under a rug. It's not to say, no, I was cool with it. Yeah, but it had an impact on the way that you saw the world and worked, and it had an impact on your brain. You might not feel it straight away, but over time, it has the effect on your nervous system and your neurons. And so yeah, emotional dysregulation as a thing that, we've noticed that everyone with ADHD kicks off over small things, or cries over small things, or doesn't feel sometimes when something big happens, or, doesn't have the self-control to not kick off when they should have that self-control. But then also, if someone has been through a lot of trauma that they don't remember or they don't think about, then things are going to trigger them and they don't even know why. So I'm going to say, emotional dysregulation is the inability to regulate your emotions, to know when something isn't as serious as it feels, to know that you're overreacting to something because it's messed up your routine. Oh, this has happened, and all of a sudden my schedule's ruined. So burst into tears, and it's like, is that okay? It's emotional dysregulation, and it falls under the ADHD diagnosis. But if you have not learned how to process your emotions, or no one was there to nurture your emotions, or you weren't ever feeling safe enough to do it in a way, you didn't open yourself up for love, and you finally do, and then everything your partner does makes you angry or tearful. Because why? You think they're going to neglect you, or you think that they're disrespecting you. Why? Because you were hurt in the past. So I'm going to always bring them both back, because the diagnosis is that I have ADHD and CPTSD. They look identical. When you look at the traits, when you look at the traits, why did I get diagnosed with that? Because of this. Why did I get diagnosed with that? Because of this. Well, guess what? I definitely went through lots of trauma, so I get that. Why do I have to have an incurable brain disorder too?
That in itself is kind of traumatic, right?
But I'm not saying I'm being stroppy, like whatever, but I'm going to focus on why these things show up in a person who has been through what I've been through, because I can tackle that, rather than, oh, that's just my ADHD, let me just take medication for the rest of my life and it will be okay. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm not saying like I said, when I went through the traumatic experiences that led to the CPTSD diagnosis, I then realized I couldn't manage my ADHD in the successful way that I was. And I'd learned through a friend that medication isn't as bad as I thought. So I went on medication and it helped me.
Yeah. Sometimes it's that crutch, isn't it, that gets you where you need to go.
Exactly. It's it's great for me. I say this because of my own experience and how I feel, but it's great for temporary, and for support. And even when I decided to stop taking it, there were days when I still did the odd day, and I still have medication there. I still didn't finish the bottle, so it's there, and I'm aware that I can on a day that I might need to, but it gives me the same effect as similar to maybe 3 coffees and 4 Red Bulls, which we know that makes your eyes shake.
I bet it would, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, do I if it, you know what I'm getting at. So I'm not against medication. I've taken it, but I just don't want to, I don't feel empowered fully knowing that there's one that I can really dig deeper on. I know it's going to be hard and I know I'm going to need support, but that's fine. And that is available. And so is the medication side. But there are bad sides to taking the medication that I didn't want for my body. I didn't want.
And that's important, isn't it, to do that research and understand
it wasn't a pride thing. Yeah, the research was I took it and felt the differences. I saw my hair falling out. I felt anxiety worse than I ever have because of the medication. Yeah, I could focus at work a bit more and I could get through my email list and tick off more tasks. But I could also do that with a little bit more energy into time management and also grace, not being obsessed with ticking off everything.
The ticking thing is a big thing. I know somebody that has that issue. What makes you super special, in my opinion, on this front anyway, I'm sure you have many reasons for being special, but on this, for the sake of this conversation, is the fact that you made that association between ADHD and CPTSD. Yeah, got it. But and it's that trauma, because I think really when you stop and you take a look at trauma can be, I didn't get picked for sports at school.
100%.
And that can be trauma. People think that we live in an age now where everybody can share their stories online, and that's lovely, and it helps so many people. But for the people that are experiencing trauma-like symptoms, but don't have a sort of backstory or origin story that meets somebody else's, because they're comparing, which should never be done, that their trauma feels just as bad to them as the person that's been through something really, difficult at home, or stuff similar to us. So I think when you look at it like that,
really, sorry to go on.
No, but when you think about it,
that was one of my traits showing up.
I got it. I can handle this. No, but
no, don't cut me off. I'll be like, okay, sorry.
I actually don't believe that. You'd be like, what? Wait, okay. But no, but what I'm getting at, I suppose, is like, if trauma can be somebody not picking you at school, being told you can't go to someone's party, I don't know, like not having enough money to do something, whatever it is, that some people might go, oh, well, I was this and I was that. Like, if it can be something like that, then surely everyone to a degree can have complex trauma problems.
This is why I said we've all been through difficult things that we haven't processed. And like, again, so what you just said, if somebody hasn't been picked at school for a sport and they expected to be, and it devastated them. And then after that, and they were 8 years old, after that, nobody reassured them, comforted them, and just said to them, you're amazing at this sport, but I had to pick my friend because they were upset last night. Or, you might not have been picked, but it doesn't matter. That doesn't mean anything. Just one word can cut the future difference. So if someone doesn't have that, depending on, they could go home and say, Mum, I didn't get picked. And their mum reaffirms them all night. Listen, you are amazing. They probably didn't pick you because, all of that. Children just take that in and run with it. And that cut off the trauma. Now, if that doesn't happen, that person might never cry about it because they don't want to seem like a crybaby or weak, because that is a thing in school. But what they do is they practice that sport to the point where they're professional in 20 years. They're a professional footballer, but they have issues around rejection in different areas of their life. And it shows up in all of their romantic relationships. And why? Because they did become the best at the sport, but they never got the support around. They did that to overcompensate. And great, if your pain turns you into a professional at things, good for you, that is amazing. But also you need to know that you didn't have to do that to be what you wanted to be at school, which was accepted. You don't have to do that to be accepted. You still have to deal with the rejection wound that happened. And again, one word can stop someone being traumatized. One word, one hug.
But this is why it's so important, because one of the questions I have on here is like, why is it so important? Because I hear this all the time. Like, people say, Johnny, I love what you do. It's really great, but I don't really think there's any point in me sort of talking about stuff that happened in the past. I don't see any use in that. And I don't see any use in bumming myself out and stuff like that. But the thing is if you don't talk about these things, you won't understand these things. If you don't understand these things, then you've taken away the option of choice in those moments when, you know, you're having a problem with your partner, or you're having a disagreement with a work colleague, or you're trying to make a decision that's really important, and you haven't got all the information because you've got this one thing that started really small, but over the years you've collected more and more evidence to support this original incident, and then you get to a point where you make a catastrophic decision because you didn't talk about this and understand it. And I think, like, how do you feel about that?
About what make the
about people, like, because I get that all the time, people saying that to me, you know.
Yeah, I was like that though, to be honest, you know, and this is where I, you know, kind of, when I started to learn about the CPTSD and understand that I, you know, I need to dig deeper. When I did get diagnosed with ADHD, the psychiatrist that spoke to me, when we sat down to talk about it, like, you know, I'd been referred to him. My doctor had said, you know, I got told to go to an ADHD specialist just to confirm, but we do think you have ADHD. Did loads of research, was like, yep, definitely got it. When I went and said, I'm here because I think I have ADHD. I've looked into it. I do. And I just want you to, I've come here for you. I don't really need the diagnosis. I just need you to get me some CBT, please. You know, just get me, I would like some support around how to manage it. But he decided to sit down and ask me questions about my childhood for an hour. And I had never been, like, I hadn't really been to therapy. I'd been to a few counseling sessions before, but never really opened up. Didn't really like talking about the hard things I'd been through, because didn't want to ever paint my mum in a bad light, didn't want to remember things, and didn't want to expose myself as a hurt person. And so I didn't really talk about these things. And even like hid a lot of it when I did have counseling opportunities. But when he started digging deeper and asking me these questions, and I'd skirt over the answers, and he would dig deeper and ask things that I was telling him for an hour, like my voice was shaking with all of the stuff about my childhood I had to tell him. And then, you know, he wasn't a therapist. Well, it wasn't like sensitive and trying to help. It wasn't a therapy session, put it that way. So I was open. I'd let all this stuff out. And he was like, so you do have ADHD, but we need to talk about the fact that you are experiencing severe trauma too. And I was like, we've just spoken about that. I feel awful. No thanks. Well, let's talk about the ADHD. Give me the medication, I'll take it, it's fine. And I made it, because I was like, what I've just experienced for that hour with no comfort or no cushion, you want me to now focus on this and not my, and excuse me, but no. I heard that ADHD can be helped. Let's talk about that. I didn't plan to bring all that stuff up. So it's funny that I didn't see a need then, even then, when I didn't know what he was saying about the why. I didn't ask him why, what's the trauma stuff that you've just pulled out of me got to do with this? You've just said I do have ADHD. It's like, I didn't see a need to go into talking about all that. Why? Because I don't cry about it anymore. I don't, you know, I do see a light at the end of the tunnel. I am hopeful. So I don't see a need to bring it all up. Didn't know that all of my behavior patterns I have in relationships, in friendships, in the things I'm scared of, were all attached to my childhood. I thought it's just how I am, you know, so I get why people don't see a need to talk about it, because they don't feel like they're currently affected by it because of lack of awareness, not hearing conversations of how trauma shows up. Like if someone listens to this now and hears the way that childhood trauma that you know happened, some people have been through things that they know happened to them. They don't really remember it, so they're not having flashbacks, they're not scared, but they know something happened, they know what happened. But if I was to say that thing that happened could be the reason you can't concentrate, and why you have anxiety, but anxiety medication doesn't work for you, then you might. Even if I just simply said it's the reason why you I don't know,
self-destructive behavior,
why you have self-destructive behavior, then people, because they're hearing these conversations in a normal way with people that have experienced it, even the one where lack of focus, inability to concentrate, inability to manage money right, but we weren't poor, but your nervous system's a state. So it's like, if when people hear that, they're like, okay, so I think I'm okay about the trauma that happened to me, but I'm not okay with how I cannot complete tasks. I start things and never finish them, which is also another trait of ADHD and falls into trauma. I self-sabotage all of the good things I do for myself. I start a great diet and I'm doing well, and then I just mess it up on purpose. I'm in a great relationship and I just ruin it on purpose. I'm not cool with that. Okay, well then that could be a result of your trauma that you're cool with. Okay, so now maybe I do need to talk to someone. Maybe I do need to figure it out. And it's like you said, it's not knowing that they're linked.
But that's what I was getting at. Exactly what I was getting. Putting diagnoses aside for a moment, I suppose if there's something that's really important here, is that firstly realizing that trauma doesn't have to be, I don't really know how to word it. It doesn't have to be sort of sexual assault or domestic violence or anything serious like that. It can be
rejected for a date.
It can be, yeah. It can be really, really simple things like, not doing well on a test, and that was really important to you, not getting a certain job or whatever. These things, you collect them over time. These seemingly insignificant, but aren't that, but are significant traumas that then build up to create these behavioral traits that then become problematic in your life.
Yeah.
And as you get away with it, though, you're going to continue to up the ante, right? So as your behavior that you don't want shows up, I don't know, self-destructive behavior, let's say you're always pushing people away, it starts off with something, something that didn't really matter, I suppose, in your life, didn't have a big impact, and it ends up with pushing away a partner, or pushing away a family member, or pushing away someone at work, which then means you're not having a job anymore and things like that. So I suppose what I'm saying is ultimately is that putting diagnoses aside, it's so important that you look back over them traumas and sort of identify them, or create a timeline even of when they happened and how they impacted you.
Exactly. It's if something changed the way, and again, there are some, and I use this example because it's, I'm going from people that I know. There are some people who basically, if something has changed the way you see yourself or the world in a negative way, it's traumatizing,
Love that.
even
That's a great way to say it.
Yeah, even if it's just you were playing truth or dare at school, and someone got dared to kiss you and they said, no, I'm not kissing her, or I'm not kissing him, everyone laughs it off, it's fine. But if that made you see yourself in a negative way, moving forward, if nobody reassures you, and you could have and again, you could have a family when you go home that are so edifying, that build you up, that remind you of how beautiful and wonderful and amazing you are all the time, and that might not affect someone like that. They might actually sit there and say you're lost and mean it, but it depends who you are. And if that did make you feel negatively about yourself, and again, if you see a car crash that you're not part of, but it makes you see the world as a dangerous, scary place, and nobody sits down and says to you, look, they're not as, I know you've witnessed that, and it's not, but they're not as common, and life, you don't have to be so scared to go out now and cautious. That witnessing that can be you might say, I've had a great childhood upbringing, but at 30 you witness a car crash and you are traumatized because you now see the world in a negative way, and no one, and not say no one, but or you didn't find the comfort and the reassurance and the support to tell you otherwise before it manifests into trauma.
Do you know what, that right there, that was brilliant. That you're absolutely right. You took a really big event and a really sort of similarly small event, and you sort of related them, and you're right. If it's not explained to you right after, if it's not unpacked and processed in a way in which you can accept it, then you're going to continuously repeat those sort of similar behaviors, or avoid certain things. You're going to start to judge, avoid. That's how people don't end up going for that job they want because of A, B, and C before, Exactly. So you're absolutely right.
What you said about people comparing, like, when people are online talking about trauma, and that it might be someone like myself who has, been abused by a partner, or lost their mum to a drug overdose, and you can say, wow, I feel like I'm experiencing CPTSD or PTSD, but there's no point me even saying anything because I haven't been through anything like that. Those things changed my view on myself and the world. And so traumatized me. But again, the both things where someone says, oh, but I only walked past a car crash and saw someone on the floor, or
I wasn't in the crash, but
I only got rejected for a date, like it was nothing, but I can't recover. It's the same. It depends who you are. It depends where your foundation and your programming, like you said. And also another thing that came up that I didn't say is when you have these big diagnoses, and these two in particular, ADHD and CPTSD, there's loads of different ways that you see it present. There's loads of different things that you see. Oh, that's ADHD, or that's trauma, my CPTSD, or and the thing is that that's so daunting as well. Like I said earlier, look at the things where it's showing up. Okay, so my relationships, or I can't concentrate, or I never complete tasks. Don't try to manage ADHD or heal from CPTSD. Just look at these little things and work on them one at a time. One at a time. Just figure out, dig deep, ask for support. How do you finish tasks when you can't concentrate, or when you don't see the reward in it, even though it's important? Just focus on that. If that's why you think you've got ADHD or CPTSD, focus on that. Because when you hear the magnitude of what the diagnosis is and how many things fall under it, it can get overwhelming. And then it's, well, I've got to take medication, because where do I start? And I'm not saying, again, don't take medication, because it can be great. But when you just say, okay, these are the things I struggle with, and until I get a little grip on these, I'm not going to focus on the others right now, if they even show up for me. So
I mean, a lot of the time people offer tools and stuff online, but I think what you're identifying there is that, you say you're having problems focusing on tasks. I think it's really important in that moment that if you really want to get past it, that you try and understand what it is you would prefer to be true instead, because only then can the tools that you're using be helpful. Because it's like getting an IKEA cabinet and not having the instructions, but you can have all the tools in the world, but if you don't know how to build it or what it looks like, then it's not going to be helpful. So I think in a first port of call. Sorry,
go on.
No, sorry. I love this is great.
How I
am. no, it's perfect. It is. It's just great. But listen, just the last question: is there anything that you'd like to pass on to people that would help them with their self-development?
I think just following on from what we were just saying, whether it's loads of, whether you're trying to just better your life, you haven't got diagnoses you're trying to manage, or even if you do, if you see that, okay, I can't sleep, oh, it's because of my ADHD, or I can't relate to people, oh, it's because of my autism, oh, I can't concentrate, it's because of my ADHD. There's going to be so many different things that you accept those things for, and you might not get out, as quickly as you could. So again, whatever it is, whatever the reason is that you reach out to a self-development coach, where if it's loads and you're like, I'm never going to get my life sorted, just focus on the things that will enable you to be the version of yourself that has caused you. There's a version of yourself that wants to come out. You've seen it, you've felt it. There's days when you are it, but then all these other things come in that feel like an enemy that just slides in and ruins things for you, and it's you. And so when you think, oh yeah, but this enemy that slides in, it's my inability to concentrate, and it's because I've got this disorder, or because I've got this, just then, spend a few months solely focusing on how to concentrate, or how to, just pick one thing at a time, work on that. An area of your life that you want to see flourish, work on that. Don't worry about all the other things that are included. Don't own these things as yours. Like, I have this, so I can't do this. Like, you can focus on it. Like, if I've been told that I've got severe combined ADHD and I'm going to have to do certain, things for the rest of my life to even be productive. And don't get me wrong, I'm human. There are days when I can't do things as good as other days, but depends on what I'm eating, depends on, and changing what I ate helped me to level out almost all of my symptoms. The condition of your blood is important. it depends on where my hormones are at. It depends on interactions I've had, other people's energy and things. That just be easy with yourself, but know that there's something you're working on, and you know, and empower yourself around that, because you don't have to own it. It doesn't have to be the same every day.
That's just someone else's opinion that they're trying to force on you, right? You know,
and it's
when
just
people
a
say
big,
that,
massive bundle of things. You've got ADHD, so now you're this. And I said, actually, if I could focus better, I would actually not be that. So I'm going to, you know, that's what I'm going to do.
You are great. I've loved this. I've absolutely loved it. It's been brilliant. Listen, tell people what's next for you and where they can find you and all the things you want to draw their attention to.
I would say I'm having a little social media break, actually. I might pop on there today, actually. I've had the urge. But I would just be announcing things on Instagram, I guess. I'm changing my website, doing a little restructure. You know, if anyone is interested in coaching, I'll be talking about how I'm going to be doing that moving forward. But if you follow me on Instagram, Penny Bell, so PENNYBELLE, everything that I'm doing and about to do, I will be talking about. So yeah, and also there's a link in my bio on Instagram called the Orange Room, and that's my online. I was going to ask about that. Yeah, that's my online community where if I am having social media breaks, I won't be having a break from that. So come and join the Orange Room. It's my little online community, and I always see the messages there. And I'd love to, if there's anything I can help with or guide or talk or whatever, just come. And it's full of goodness as well. So yeah,
I bet it is, man. Thank you so much for today. I really, really appreciate your time. And hopefully we might even try and wangle a little Instagram live one day. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.